The Maple Valley Creative Arts Council is proud to present this short film titled Maple Valley Pandemic Stories. This oral history project was made possible by a grant from Humanities Washington. We thank them for their support of local artists and specifically our project. Throughout 2022, we invited Maple Valley residents to answer questions about their coronavirus pandemic experience. We wanted to document this unusual time. They could write their responses or meet for an in-person interview. What you will experience over the next 40 minutes is a set of 9 different stories. These stories are the participants' own thoughts and words. They represent how they changed, adapted, and in some cases struggled. Their words show the capacity and character of our neighbors in overcoming the dramatic obstacles brought on by a once-in-a-century health pandemic. We are inspired by and thankful for all who shared their thoughtful stories for this project. Please enjoy Maple Valley Pandemic Stories. This interview is with Shannon Brannon of Maple Valley, Washington. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning.
On March 13, 2020, the President of the United States declared a national emergency concerning the coronavirus disease outbreak, and the Governor of Washington ordered a statewide school closure. Do you remember what you were doing and thinking that day?
I do remember it quite well. I teach at Tahoma High School, and we had been anticipating this day for a few weeks. When it finally came, it was surreal. I could not really believe that we would be closing school for 6 weeks. It was a thought that was absolutely unheard of. 6 weeks seemed like it would be an eternity.
What happened next?
School in the spring of 2020 was very much an optional activity for kids. Their grades were frozen at third quarter, so if a student had a passing grade, they may or may not have connected with their teachers. There was no live teaching, only asynchronous postings of class activities. It was very disconnected and unfulfilling.
How have you and your family navigated your way through the epidemic?
A lot has happened. My father-in-law had a stroke in May of 2020. Thankfully, the hospital let us all spend time with him before he passed away. The hardship was really not being able to have a regular funeral or memorial service for him. We risked it and had an outdoor gathering in the middle of the summer, a risk I wasn't really very comfortable with, but I'm glad now that we took. My younger son and I got the virus in October of 2020. We had very mild symptoms. I thought I had a sinus infection, and he had more of bronchitis type symptoms. We recovered quickly, and I taught remotely through the whole thing. Then my husband got Omicron in October of 2021. He was vaccinated. I've never seen him sicker, and I wonder if he would have been hospitalized if he had not had the vaccination. Thankfully, he's fine now.
I'm happy to hear you're all okay now. Would you like to share anything else?
I really loved how much time we got to spend with our younger son. Our daily walks will always be moments I'll treasure. I think spending that time together when he otherwise would have been out of the house a lot more. He was a senior in that year of the 2020-2021 school year. They were precious times.
Thank you for sharing your story, Shannon.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Sharon Chastain, who has been the children's librarian for the Maple Valley branch of the King County Library System for the past 25 years. Can you remember what you were doing or thinking on the day that the governor issued the stay home, stay healthy order and the library was set to close for 2 weeks?
Yes. The last day that the Maple Valley Library was open, I was there as people flooded in returning books and grabbing piles of books to take home just in case. And it was like Black Friday, only with free books. People were excited, anxious, and unsure about what was to come. Everybody was talking, but we all felt like we were going forward together. None of us knew it would be so long. And when I went home to start the lockdown, I started to worry that I'd been exposed in the crowds. I'd been surrounded by people all day long, no masks at that point. And I was fine, but that was the first time I experienced anxiety around exposure. It's like, welcome to COVID-19.
Can you explain how your work changed?
Well, work went from face-to-face interactions with hundreds of children, parents, teachers, and community partners to social media connection on Facebook. It was the most immediate way I could reach out to my Storytime families and my teachers because we were all connected there. So when book publishers gave permissions to read books online, almost immediately, within a week, I was able to start a Facebook Live Storytime because many of the families were already connected with me there. We'd been there together for years. And we have a Maple Valley Library children's page that we all connect on. And that's where we turned to find each other when things got strange. Using my personal iPad and laptop, I read to them and connected with them from my home, from my kitchen, in fact. Storytime is a library staple and something I've done for years. It's full of music, movement, and wordplay. And families come to the library to read and sing together. It's community at its most engaging and silly. And when I went online, I maintained Storytime straight through for almost 2 years on Facebook, along with book talks and science programs. And there are around 200 plus participants each week. My Facebook Live story times reached all around the world, which was new for me. It was surprising and fun. People living in Maple Valley with family members in India, Ireland, Canada, Maryland, and more were able to share story time together each week. News of story time online became kind of a word of mouth thing, going from family to family. And being able to maintain connection with my local families and reach former story timers from all over the place, as well as extended family and friends all around the world, was amazing. It kept me grounded and centered during very strange times. Eventually, the library system figured out Zoom programming, and Facebook Live changed to Zoom story times. Zoom story time, which started because of the pandemic, will continue. We're still doing them now. We still have about 200 Zoom Storytime kids each week, but they tend to be more local to King County than worldwide, but from all over the county. I still get questions and views from around the world for my Facebook posts, but Storytime is in person again, and Zoom. I miss the idea of families around the world sharing in Storytime together on Facebook, but it would cost a lot of money to buy the publisher permissions that were free during COVID. So now we stick with Zoom and in-person Storytimes. So we also had my teachers in the Tahoma School District. They were amazing partners during the pandemic. Many reached out directly to me or responded to my offers of remote programs. I was reading to up to 1,500 students each month as I Zoomed with their online classes. I've been able to be in direct contact with my teachers and their students more during the pandemic than I was ever able to manage in person. And we'll probably be holding on to some of the ways we connected during the pandemic, even as things return to more in-person options.
How did the physical difference of working from home affect you?
The King County Library System supported staff by allowing us to work from home immediately. I figured out how to use all my personal technology to read to my audience. I found the time before vaccination, working from home to be incredibly productive. I was able to focus solely on my work as a children's librarian with my dogs by my side, and it was an amazing time. I didn't feel isolated. I felt surrounded by my community.
If you think about 1 year from now into the future, what do you hope you will be doing?
I try not to look too far ahead or get my hopes up too high as things seem to go forward 3 steps and back 2. My hope is that the pandemic will be shadowy history in a year and we'll be able to all be engaged in our lives and communities, too much engaged in our lives and communities to worry too much about it. It will be of the past.
Thank you for sharing your story, Sharon.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Stacy Shireman of Maple Valley, Washington. Good afternoon, Stacy.
Good afternoon.
On March 13, 2020, Governor Jay Inslee ordered a statewide school closure to slow the spread of COVID-19. Do you remember what you were doing and thinking on this day?
We were told a few days before this date that schools would close for 6 weeks, and I really thought it would be 6 weeks. On March 13th, about a third of my class was absent. Parents were keeping their kids home with all the unknowns at the time. The rest of my class and I were doing our annual fundraiser. It was snowing and there were jokes about toilet paper shortages. I remember having each kid load up a bag with books to take home from my classroom library. I had no idea how we were going to continue schooling, but I just wanted them to have books.
In the beginning, how did you connect with people?
In the beginning, every meeting for work was on Zoom, so everybody learned Zoom. We pushed out weekly content to our students through Google Classroom or Seesaw. I held twice weekly meetings, not lessons, with my class. It felt like the most unnatural way to go about teaching children.
If you went out, where did you go and what was it like?
We did go to Orcas Island in June 2020. They were really strict about the masks in Island County before the rest of the state, so the requirement to wear a mask in the grocery store was very new. And I felt concerned for my son and my teenage sister who was with us. She had suffered with her mental health as the pandemic started. So seeing everyone in a mask and wearing one was kind of traumatizing for her at that time.
Did you get the virus, or do you know anyone who did?
I did not know many people who got the virus until recently. To my knowledge, I did not get the virus, nor did anyone in my immediate family.
Did your career, work, life change?
I teach students who all started their kindergarten year online. Some of them came back to school part-time and socially distanced for the second half of the year. There are a lot of social skills at this age of kids are missing that I usually take for granted. I've had to address many more social and emotional needs in addition to getting all the academic requirements back from pre-pandemic this year. Social distancing is done, but these kids don't have a lot of experience playing and working so closely together. One thing that changed that I love is doing many more meetings online.
Did your use of technology change in terms of your work?
As a teacher, my job changed 100%. I had to do my job in a completely new way after 15 years. It was a huge learning curve. I learned so much about Google, and now I use technology every day, much more than ever before. Parent and teacher conferences have been really helped by video conferencing technology. I was able to conference with the entire family of a student who lived with his aunt and uncle while his dad was stationed somewhere else and his mother lived in Asia. It was such a great opportunity that would not have happened if not for the pandemic.
Some people are reflecting back on the past 2 years. Although there were many restrictions, frustrations, and stress, perhaps some good things happened. Do you have any thoughts about positive effects?
I'm proud of myself and my fellow teachers for learning so many new skills in a short amount of time for the benefit of our students. I'm grateful I was able to complete my administrator certification during the 2020 to 2021 school year. I don't think I would be able to complete the entire program in 1 year if not for the pandemic and the work and school changes that happened because of it.
Looking back, is there anything you would like to do again or do differently?
I would embrace the changes, roll with the punches, and take advantage of the gift of time that was given for reflection instead of anxiety about what's to come.
Thank you for sharing your story, Stacy.
My pleasure.
And there you go.
This interview is with Andy Peck of Maple Valley, Washington. Good afternoon, Andy.
Good afternoon.
Do you remember what you were doing or thinking in March of 2020 when the governor of the state of Washington ordered the statewide quarantine?
I was very surprised at the unprecedented and extreme measures taken by other countries and cities in the U.S. I did not expect the virus to actually have a major impact on our lives. By the time that measures were imposed in this area, it wasn't a surprise.
What was daily life like for you? Were you affected by many restrictions?
Since we were retired, work wasn't an issue. For a while, our grandchildren did remote school from our home while our house was having water damage repaired. Grocery shopping was initially done by delivery or pickup. Eventually, I shopped in person, taking advantage of senior hours. When in-person schooling returned, we committed to putting our grandchildren on the school bus and meeting their bus in the afternoon since we were not traveling due to COVID, and it minimized their contact with other children outside of school. I am now shopping normally except for wearing a mask. Our travel has generally been limited to local drives and camping in our motorhome.
Did your use of technology change?
Absolutely. Technology has made COVID more bearable than with previous pandemics, but only for those with access to high-speed internet. It allowed our grandchildren to participate in virtual school. It allowed me to continue participating in volunteer activities. My wife changed from meeting annually with her high school friends to weekly Zoom meetings. People without high-speed internet access were isolated and left behind their peers.
Were there other hardships that you would care to share with us?
None other than a sense of guilt because we were better positioned to survive the effects of COVID than so many other people. We are retired and financially comfortable. We were also able to help with care of our grandchildren. Their mother is a speech therapist in local elementary school and her father travels extensively for work. Our daughter commented that if we'd not been available to help with childcare, she would have needed to quit her job. She stated that we've affected the lives not only of her 2 children, but for her 50 student clients. COVID did not interrupt our family members' income. We consider ourselves extremely fortunate. It was a major inconvenience, but not a disaster.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Dee Hope of Maple Valley, Washington. Good morning, Dee.
Good morning.
How did the statewide shutdown because of the COVID quarantine affect you?
I was working at a school and we had to shut it down. I ordered shopping and supplies. Not enough toilet paper though. I was worried for my kids and students. Mostly I was terrified for my unborn child as I was 4 months pregnant.
Did you stay in? How did you pass the time with your family?
We did stay in. We bought games and learning tools for the kids and stuff to play with outside.
You mentioned you were pregnant, so I imagine you had to meet with a doctor. What was that like?
We stayed at home. I had to go to the OBGYN and the hospital for pregnancy and birth and stuff like that, and it was terrifying. I was scared all the time that someone would sneeze on me or cough on me. Yeah.
Did you get the virus, or do you know anyone who did?
I'm not sure if we did, but we were really sick at the start before all the tests. Yes, I know people who got it and they are fine, except for one little girl who has inflammation of the heart because of COVID.
Did your career or work life change?
Yes, I lost my job at the school. They couldn't afford to pay me, and I started teaching Zoom singing lessons.
Was there anything you were planning to do that you had to cancel or reschedule?
Yeah, we couldn't build our house because of lumber prices being ridiculous. We couldn't visit or have family visit from Australia. No one could meet my infant baby. My family and husband's family haven't seen us in 2.5 years. So no one's met our youngest baby, and we are still waiting to build our house.
Sounds like you put many plans on hold. Did you miss any other big life events?
Yes, we had to have my baby shower via Zoom, and that was pretty hard. My kids couldn't come and see me when the baby was in hospital when he was born, and that was really heartbreaking. I miss my family get-togethers back home, and I haven't been able to meet many babies that were born in that time. My 40th birthday was also missed as my family and friends couldn't come.
Were you able to start any new projects?
Well, I did start a mums group to keep in touch and contact with the mums in my community to reach out and have mum time. And it's been really hard for mums. I've been reaching out to the community through Buy Nothing and buying eggs from neighbours instead of the store. We also had a weekly Zoom trivia, which was a lifesaver for many of my friends. We were able to host Girl Scouts over Zoom no matter what, and I can give singing lessons on Zoom if a family member is sick.
You certainly did a lot on Zoom. Is there anything else you would want to share?
We did lose 2 friends to suicide during the quarantine. The isolation really hurt a lot of people, and it just breaks my heart. My son really struggled being away from people. He is sick and was talking about death a lot. He had such a horrid experience when he lost his school. He missed his friends and refused to wear clothing. My daughter struggled, but she could play with her friends on Xbox and Kids Messenger, so it wasn't as bad for her. I felt so much sadness not being able to share my last pregnancy and birth of my baby with anyone, but it did make me reach out to the community and make friends with my awesome neighbours. I got to know people I wouldn't normally have reached out to.
Thank you for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Melise Yun of Maple Valley, Washington. Good afternoon, Melise.
Good afternoon.
When Governor Inslee announced the statewide stay-at-home quarantine, do you remember what you were doing or thinking?
I remember being pretty concerned and questioning what this meant for work. I worked with a close team of people, and we had a lot of field work planned for the spring and summer. A lot of our field work was delayed months, and we worked from home instead of our office. I was really grateful that we had the work from home option because other people that I knew that worked solely in the field just had to stop working entirely without being paid, which seemed awful.
Did you get the virus, or do you know anyone who did?
My boyfriend got COVID while traveling out of state in December 2020. Since we spent a couple of weeks apart already, him having COVID meant that we couldn't be near each other for another couple of weeks, which was heartbreaking. One day during his quarantine period, he drove up to my house and surprised me. I was sitting at my desk at home next to the window, and he called my phone. I asked him what he was up to, and he told me to look outside the window. I saw his car, and he stepped outside to talk to me over the phone while we looked at each other from a distance. We talked for a while, but it was the most meaningful that we got to see each other in person again, even if it was from across the street. He eventually got over his sickness and fully recovered.
As a student, How did your school life change?
I started a certificate course last fall, and we were entirely virtual for the first 2 quarters. It was difficult to stay focused because of all the distractions at home, but it was also more convenient at the time because I would have had to commute to class in downtown Seattle after work. Spring quarter began recently, and it's back in person. It's nice to meet in person to have conversations with one another about the course and our jobs before the class starts, since we didn't get to do that as much over Zoom.
Looking back, would you say there were any positive effects on your life that resulted from the restrictions of the pandemic?
I enjoyed the opportunity to slow down and to have time again for my hobbies. I picked up crocheting around fall 2020 and learned so many new techniques, and I've made dozens of plushies and pieces of clothing. So many that I decided to sell some and have some commissions. My tiny business is mostly to declutter my space because I've made so many things that could be enjoyed by others instead of being in the back of my closet. But if I'm lucky, I could be able to start a small business.
Thank you for sharing your story, Melise.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Mary Jane Glazer of Maple Valley, Washington. Good afternoon, Mary Jane.
Good afternoon.
Do you remember what you were doing or thinking in March of 2020 when the statewide COVID quarantine was announced?
I'm sure I was watching and reading the news. I responded by making the decisions to shut down the Creative Arts Center and discussing with my husband how we would change our way of life. We started wearing masks, limited our time away from home, signed up for weekly dairy deliveries, ordered groceries online, and had other home deliveries. We did not go out to restaurants and canceled all in-person get-togethers.
It sounds like you spent much more time at home. Were you able to work on any projects?
I did many home projects, such as organizing closets and collecting donations to Goodwill. I hired contractors to complete repairs and remodeling projects on our house. I was able to complete some creative projects, such as an embroidery project that I had started when I was 19 years old and had neglected to finish until recently.
Did the epidemic affect any relationship with your pets?
My sweet dog Jolly died after months of frequent trips to the vet. I would have to stay in the car in the parking lot while the vet tech picked up my dog and delivered him back to the car. It was so sad to not be able to attend the exams and comfort my dog. It was also difficult to get appointments since others seemed to be needing veterinary attention more than usual. A few months after my dog died, we adopted a puppy. It goes without saying that he's kept us quite busy with his training. Our new puppy is rarely alone. We got vaccinated and boosted. Now we wonder what will happen when we start going places without him.
I'm sorry to hear about the loss of Jolly, but hopefully your new puppy is doing well. Jumping forward in time, what is life like today in April 2022?
Normality is slowly emerging. I'm beginning to meet with friends in person for coffee and/or meals. I'm still shopping online and may choose that to be my new normal. I grocery shop in person, but fewer trips are made. I still have dairy delivered, and I still avoid crowds. But I bought tickets to Stars on Ice in May. I'm being careful, but less careful than a year ago. Going forward, I'll probably continue to avoid crowds as my new normal. I haven't had my usual cold or flu bouts since wearing the mask became a habit.
Is there anything else that you would care to share with us?
We missed seeing family and friends during the pandemic. At times, we felt lonely, even though we lived as a couple. My parents live in Walla Walla and did not travel during the pandemic. In fact, they rarely left their home. I'm looking forward to seeing my parents soon and celebrating their 70th wedding anniversary. The pandemic pointed out the importance of socialization. I sincerely doubt that we will take that for granted in the future.
Thank you for sharing your story, Mary Jane.
My pleasure.
This interview is with Sisters Grayson and Avery, two students in the Tahoma School District. Do you remember where you were on the day when schools and public spaces shut down and people were asked to stay home?
I still have pictures from that day saved in my phone. I was at my dance studio eating lunch and having a good time with my friends, like I did every day before we had class. This was going to be the last day I would ever do this that year, but I didn't know it at the time. We knew the announcement had been made, but to be honest, we weren't really concerned. We figured it would blow over in the time of our next dance competition.
How was the pandemic discussed with your family?
I don't really remember all the discussions we had, except I knew there were many. My mom would always talk to my sister and me when we expressed the need. The hardest part of all of this was seeing my mom, who I thought knew everything in the world, at a loss for what was happening.
How did you go to remote school? Did you do anything else in your routine that was different?
I hated the way that school was. Even though I got to sit in my pajamas and get food delivered to me, I felt so lonely. I still felt like I was learning a little bit and not as much as I would have if I was in person in school. I had a much harder time focusing and understanding my work while on Zoom, but I still got all A's.
Switching to you, Avery, I understand you had a different school experience. Can you describe it?
I would set my alarm to get up a full hour before class, so I had time to get ready and hang out. I liked virtual school. It was a lot easier and I didn't have the kids in the class that would distract me. I did well. I learned to change the font colors to blue, which stands out against the black, which helps me with my type of dyslexia where I see colors differently. Blue helps me glue the letters down so they don't move as much. A lot of teachers would highlight the things that we need to do in blue so that kids could see the document better. I didn't like the camera thing. I had to keep my camera on all the time. That was a rule for 6th graders. There was a setting on Zoom where you had to request to turn off the camera. You could be booted out of Zoom and then you could be marked absent or tardy. When you had to log back on, your partition grade would be docked. I didn't want to get in trouble.
Back to you, Grayson. Do you have any final thoughts on the effects of the pandemic?
If I could go back, I would like to change my attitude and the way I behaved during the beginning of lockdown. I will be the first to say I was not a very nice person then. I think it was just that I was scared and lost, but what I didn't realize was so was everyone else. If I could go back, I would try to keep it a more positive outlook and allow myself to just live in the moment of the time.
Thank you, Grayson and Avery, for sharing your stories.
Our pleasure.
This interview is with Mark Persley, the Executive Director of the Maple Valley Community Center, a nonprofit organization that provides programs for families, youth, and senior adults. Mark, can you explain how your organization was impacted during the pandemic, what changed, and how did you do it? In the beginning, where did you get your guidance on how to operate?
Around February 27th of 2020, I talked to the Department of Public Health, and they advised us to wash hands, not cough on people, and stay home if we were sick. They sent us some posters about basic hygiene practices, so we started looking for commercial Purell dispensers, which we found, but we couldn't find the inserts because they were only to go to hospitals. We also had monthly calls with all of the senior centers in King County. We were all asking each other, how do we fit in? We're not a restaurant, a store, a stadium, church, or school. We were in no man's land, and there was never a rule that seemed to apply to us. On March 11, our Maple Valley staff went to the Auburn Senior Center to see how their drive-through program worked. On March 23rd, our governor issued an executive order to close our doors to the public, which was our community. We were shut down. The following day, I met with my executive board, and we decided to continue the meal program and let the staff know their options. We started our marketing campaign the next day, sending out postcards, posting on Facebook and our website, and scheduling robocalls, letting our community know we would be running a Monday, Wednesday, Friday drive-through lunch program. We had a hard meeting on the 25th of March with our staff. I remember sitting in our main hall, all of our staff in a big circle, 6 feet apart, so we were just kind of shouting at each other. I went around the circle to each person and asked, do you feel comfortable being here? I told them if they want to be here, we'd love to have them. If you don't feel comfortable, that's perfectly fine. You'll be furloughed. I also told them I appreciate you, appreciate what you do, but don't come to work. And they pretty much made their decisions then. Half of my staff furloughed themselves. And I think those that furloughed themselves didn't think it would last more than 2 weeks. We served our first senior drive-through lunches on March 16th, 2020. We served 38 people and delivered 3 additional lunches. Over the course of 27 months, our numbers grew from 30 or 40 a day to about 170. We had some people who were furloughed who had lost their jobs, but what we did notice is that we had a lot of people who were coming through in luxury cars. They didn't need the food. They told us things like, coming here is why I took a shower today, or this is why I got up today, to drive through the lunch line. Many of our seniors have dogs and cats, which are their families, and they often brought their pets with them. So in addition to lunch, we handed out lots and lots of dog and cat treats. We brought in celebrity and military greeters, the mayor, the chamber manager, the new school superintendent, the school board president, and costumed Tahoma School District mascots from every school. We had a polar bear, an otter, an eagle, and a tiger. We also had the Army National Guard and Washington State Guard who were called up to work COVID emergency responses. They loved it here because instead of being called away, they got to go home every night to their families. We tried to play up the holidays. For Easter, I put on a bunny suit. For Christmas, we had Santa and his elves from the Rotary Club. On Veterans Day, we handed out flags, we gave out flowers, and said, "Thank you for your service." The holiday that really hit me was St. Patrick's Day. We came out in our green plastic bowler hats and handed out green cookies, and people said, "What are you doing? Why?" They said it never even occurred to them that it was St. Patrick's Day. And it seemed incredibly telling, and it was very sad because they had lost a sense of time. Celebrations are a basic fundamental of community. You gather together for a celebration, whether it's a birthday, a wedding, a birth, a bar mitzvah, or it's just St. Patrick's Day. Celebrations bring communities together, and they just drifted. It may seem like such a minor thing, but celebrations are important because they mark milestones that I think a community needs to recognize. Just so you know that we're on the right path. Over time, as people lined up to drive around the parking lot of our drive-thru, some of them would roll down their windows and talk back and forth to each other. Our 2 or 3 ladies at the drive-thru table did an amazing job. There was a whole lot of, "Hey guys, how you doing?" or "Have you held that grandbaby yet?" They came to know everyone in those 3 minutes of handing out food. I thought about the short length of the exchanges and what a thin line there is between making it and not making it. I hope we did more than just hand out free food. I think we did. The last day of our program was June 29th, 2022. We feel we are the professional organization that's making an impact on people's lives every day. It's good. It's very good.
Beck, do you have any more thoughts about the pandemic?
I think some people stepped up. I think some people closed down. And I think some people saw this as an opportunity to cash in. There was a lot of sadness and loss. But I also think in a small way it was kind of cool because we were all making it up as we went. What are we going to do? How are we going to make it happen tomorrow?